So okay, we've only got we'll talk about G2 at the end, obviously. We've got Karmine Corp now. We both have them third, which by the way, I actually think is quite interesting because the funny thing about this roster is
second.
Oh, you had them second, sorry.
Me.
Okay. Wait there a second. Oh, you had Fnatic third. Sorry, yes. Okay. So you have them second. I have them third. Right. For Karmine Corp, the reason why this one's interesting to me is the problem I think a lot of people are going to have with this roster is people like Born Upset just actually made themselves look a bit shit at the end of the last lineup. And they also, if you notice, are two very scrutinized players because both of them have the same hype. Like they should be the absolute best at their role and carry the whole game. So unsurprisingly, if they ever don't carry the game, every fucking fan goes in on them. And then the other factor, and I feel like this is the real hinge factor, Sabatine. That's why actually you're one of the perfect people to talk about this. How the fuck does someone evaluate this lineup if they don't actually know how Sakan played in the RLs? And the problem is, if you only remember Sakan on Vitality a million years ago in the Ice Age of fucking... That ain't the same player, mate. That was so many years ago. He's a veteran at this point in time. And so the problem I have is I actually think a lot of people don't watch the LFL, mate. And so they're actually going to probably be out. They're going to think, oh, Ball's overrated, Upset, never wins. Sakan, isn't he some bad player? Carbashar, that was years ago. So the joke is I actually think this roster might catch some people by surprise if they're not a French or a Karmine Corp fan. Where are you? What's your reasons for having them second? Why are you so high on them?
So the first thing is I think that I put them second, but every team for second to 5 or 6 can be second.
Right,
so, because I think aside from G2, all these teams are very stacked. But I had to put it straight. I think the players have experience at winning titles.
Oh, by the way, quickly just say the roster because I forgot to. So obviously they kept 3 players from the RL. They kept Kabashar top lane, Sakan mid, and Targamas, if you don't know, came back to the RL's played support. And then they got Bo and Upset, Jungle and AD basically from Vitality. So there's a lot. Keep going. And Yamato Cannon's
Yeah, coach. I mean, I feel like usually when you bring people from the ERLs to the LEC, they are players that have to learn their position. They have to learn a lot of things. Kabashar is a veteran from the LEC, play Worlds. Targamas played at Worlds. I think Sakan has been the best ERL player for multiple years. I think last year he had actually a pretty bad showing, but he stated himself that his motivation was a little bit low playing in the ERLs and staying at this level because he needed more challenge. So I think this year is going to be extremely motivated. These players won titles so many times. They've played so many clutch BO5s. They played so many tense situations that they are not rookies. Yes, they're coming from the ERLs, but they have more approach. They have more track record than VTO. They have more track records than any guys at SK besides Niski. They have more track records than anyone, probably even at BDS. So these players are dangerous. I don't think that Sakan and Kabashar are like exceptional in comparison to the LEC, the way they were at their LFL time. Sorry, but the upgrade at the jungle position from Siencroft to Bo and seeing Bo speak and shot call in house made me realize that the game is already figured out. When you have Bo in your team, and I'm very surprised that Vitality didn't play better last year. The guy says everything. You have nothing to do. The play is called by himself. Bo is like, oh, enemy jungle has no flash. He can play bot side. We dive bot in next wave. So you just have to click on the minions, man. That's it. So for this reason, I think Bo is going to make a lot of calls. The only question mark I have in the back of my head with this team is Upset. Can they make Kabashar, Bo, Upset work at the same time is a question mark, and how good Sakan is going to be versus the mid in LEC. But on the paper, there is really nothing among the mid laners in LEC or the mid jungles that make me scared for the pair Sakan and Bo. I think for what you lose with Sakan, you get it with Bo. And for this reason, and the fact that there is a whole culture of playing high-intensity matches and winning titles with Karmine, I think they're going to come in for themselves with the expectation of being a top team, and that helps you a lot when you start.
Yeah, I'm actually in a similar place because I'll start where you were at the end there. Like, first of all, I don't care that, like, this is where fans are going to think I'm just like refusing to admit I was wrong because I hyped Bo the whole last year in LEC. Because the thing is, mate, I saw him play those LPL games. I've seen the solo queue games and I know behind the scenes those stories about how the scrims were awesome. Like, I've heard from so many sources I can trust, including my own eyes. The guy's talent is fucking bonkers. And I've also heard a similar thing that if people knew how actually, like, essentially when he wasn't on stage on LEC, this guy is mega talented. Everyone who I know who's played with him tells me, like, he actually could for real like the best jungler. So the key thing for me in this team is I'm trying to reverse engineer a squad where he gets to be the MVP of the LEC. I think it's actually plausible with his talent level. And so the cool thing is, I think you nailed it right there, mate. In the same way as when you had Inspired, but it was like, oh, there's some clash between Inspired and Larson, and like they don't quite work. But you put him with Jojo and tell Jojo just basically just play, like let him have all the resources, and you just go in the lane. Suddenly, Inspired looks amazing. Suddenly the team works. I'm with you. Normally, what would put me off this team is that in theory, Sakan's the biggest question mark, and he's playing mid lane. But I agree. The difference is his job isn't be Caps or the best mid laner. His job is allow Bo to be the best jungler. You've done your job, mate, and we can be a top 3 team immediately. We can probably challenge for the title. Yeah, exactly. So actually, some of the pressure I also think is relieved from Sakan. Then also his other solo laner is Cabo, who's played with for years now. And by the way, if people don't know, the key thing about Cabashad is this: his name value isn't high because he chose not to be an LEC. He had an offer from Fnatic a couple of years ago. Instead, I wonder if people don't know. I've heard, by the way, he could have been an LEC a bunch of times. The difference is he wanted to chill in the LFL. Remember, he is French, he wants to live in France. Also, Karmine Corp, supposedly behind the scenes, people say, told him sort of, eventually we will try and get the LEC spot and basically like stick with us, sort of you'll come with us. It actually makes it just sound like a loyal person, but it doesn't even sound like he was just like scared to go in LEC. I think Cabashad was fucking good when he used to be in LEC, mate. He was a really good player. So people will forget what he used to be like. And remember, who was his old coach? The new coach, Yamato Cannon, was his guy when they were in Vitality all those years ago.
And he had Upset too.
Yep.
And
you're right. Too. He also had Upset. So
the choice for Yamato Cannon, I at first, when I saw the off-season of coaches, I was like, I hope that Karmine is going to get Mac. But then with the players they have and the fact that he's been working at Vitality, and I think Sakan was in Vitality Academy back then, Vitality B, and he has worked with Cabo, and he has worked with Upset, I think there was a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for Karmine to go with Yamato Cannon. And so, although I would have a lot of question marks if this team wasn't assembled the way it got, like the story, the context is very important with Karmine. On the paper, I would say, like if SK went and hired these 5 players and this coach, I would have had a lot of question marks. But because it comes from a transition from an existing project, and so far Karmine has always delivered, and they very quickly changed when they didn't, when they got Kaori and Whiten and skins, it didn't work, they immediately changed. For this reason, I do not see Karmine failing hard, but I would say their chances of failure are higher than teams such as Vitality or Fnatic.
So you're ranking somewhat based off if it all goes well and it all works out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like if all goes, it's like I try to put weights because if everything goes well, Rogue should be like first or second. Sure. But I think the chances for working are lower. So I'd say Karmine has a decent chance of working. But if it doesn't work, they're going to be worse than Vitality, for instance. But Vitality has not as many chances of being that top team because they have hoopsies on the way, which I think Karmine will have less of.
Yes. And then also, to me, so that solves the mid lane problem. I'll put it this way, at a minimum, I'll tell you right now, Cabashad will be a top laner. I think he has a chance, by the way, to be really good as well because he's so experienced. And then everyone knows I'm a mad biased Upset fan. But here's the thing. It's like, to me, in the same way as I make Larson my new Froggen, Upset is obviously my new Forgiven, isn't he? Here's the thing. If you do play his way though, mate, and you do give him those champions, he can fucking carry some games. And I'll tell you what, if there's anyone knows how to make him play the way he wants to, you saw it in Fnatic, guys, with Yamato Cannon. That's why I agree with you, by the way. I actually think Yamato is an inspired choice for this team because he's actually shown, this is what's funny. I think people look at Fnatic and because when the roster was initially announced in 2022, people thought they should be number 1 and they didn't win. So they view it as a failure. If you know how bad they eventually got in summer, dude, I think it's a miracle. He like brought them back from the dead. They came 3rd, went to Worlds. They were even winning games at Worlds for fuck's sake. Remember they beat T1 that year? Like people forget these games. So I thought actually his band-aids were fucking amazing, mate. Like, and if there's ever a team where, if something goes wrong, you're going to have to band-aid in this team. You're going to have to play around big egos. You're going to have to tell someone you're not carrying because Bo is carrying. Sorry, you're not carrying because Upset is carrying. Like, you're going to have those hard conversations. And if people don't know, one of Yamato's strengths, it's why you all love him on shows, is he's a very charismatic individual. This is a guy who can win someone over in a convo and get buy-in and convince you, hey, I know it's shit now, but I tell you what, you play this champ, I'll convince him to play this other one, and we'll make it work, right? Like, I actually think he's a really good one because I agree also, by the way, that in theory, some of these players have a lot of pressure on them. Like people like Board Upset are going to be considered washed if they don't do well. The Karmine Corp, the actual players coming from the RLs, People don't know them that well. By the way, we didn't even mention it, but Targamas, obviously, everyone just remembers XL. By the way, there's a prediction I have for you right now. This will be a bounce back fucking year from Targamas, I'm telling you right now. Because as far as I heard behind the scenes, he was also in the Vethio camp, where it just turns out he's not just a plug and play guy. You have to set him up the right way. You have to have the right people around him. You have to have the right, I'd even say the right structure of people to like do problem solving in VODs or help him figure out what to do. I think the flaw was we saw him in G2, where, by the way, someone like Dylan Falco also does that, sets the team up, protects you. And what we made the mistake of is we saw him at his best in that team, and we thought, right, this is just a stud support. You just chuck him in any team, it'll be great. It turns out it's not the case, but this is where people forget. We have a term in English: you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. All you do when you let the bath go is you let the bathwater go. They're acting like, guys, if he really sucks as much as he did on XL, then how did he do that in G2? How did he win those championships? How did he like mix it up at Worlds? Obviously, he can work. It's just you have to write the right setup. So I think this could also be that. I'm putting a lot of eggs in the Yamato basket, but I actually think this is another one. There's a reason why I have him third on my list. I'm pretty hyped about this team, actually. I'm quite excited, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Targamas, if you look at Excel, he blind speak every single game, yes. And then he switches to Karmine Corp and immediately gets the last pick right side, and every single time feels like he's the best player on the team. You have some players that you need to put in certain, like we have plenty of players like this in Europe, like VTO, you have a lot of ADCs, Patrick is like this, Upset is like this, Comp is like this. There is very few players that you can actually just plug and play. Kobe was like this, Flackhead is like this, but I don't even think Caps can play in any team and just be like straight good. He needs a support that can roams to mid. There is plenty of players that will not deliver what you ask for if you can't give them what they ask for too. And I feel like it's the duty of the owners and the general manager to do their proper study and scouting to make sure that they assemble coherent pieces. And the fact that they've imported Steak as well to work with Bo specifically to have someone that can actually create positive loop feedbacks with them. The fact that they've got Yamato specifically to work with Cabochard, Upset, and Bo, that he knows very well. The fact that they've maintained Reha, that was the strategic coach from last year, moving into, and they've made all the right choices, the best theoretical moves that they could do on the chessboard. Is it gonna give them the win? I can't tell you. The season is gonna start this weekend, but at least on the paper, this Karmine team doesn't come, like when you think that it was Astralis, never in history of Astralis I would have said I put them in top 3.
Yes, of course.
So I'm very happy that there is a significant upgrade in the ambition of this slot.
Oh yeah, by the way, you also did mention that. I forgot to mention that. If people don't know, they brought in Steak, who's like the Taiwanese coach, who was Bo's coach in FPX. He actually did coach him in that team. And by the way, has had a lot of success. He's also like won the LPL and been at Worlds and stuff. So yeah, I think that's also like another very clever move. Think about that. Well, there's one time when we saw this guy in competitive look totally cracked when he was in FPX. Why not just get his coach from that team? Just get that guy, fly that guy over and say, work your magic. Like, again, be the whisperer. Get this guy to play like that. That's actually quite a smart move, yeah. Because, by the way, there's one last thing before we go to G2, because I don't think the G2 section will be that long for obvious reasons. I actually feel like another thing you'll notice as a trend that's emerged here is, much like you were saying with, which was the team that you were talking about earlier that you said had the really big staff? Who were you referring to when you were talking about that? Do you remember?
Energy.
NRG, yes, you're right, because famously in that team, they had like positional staff, and then they had like not just assistant coach, they had a massive staff of people. There wasn't just like 2 people, a head coach and stage coach. That's also another thing, by the way, I feel like we have to move beyond. Now, I will admit, this is actually an area, by the way, where I think the Asian teams are behind, because they still stick with that system. They have like the head coach, the strategic coach, and they're like an analyst or whatever, right? I actually think if you look, people like Peter Dunn, if you don't know, by the way, guys, Mac and Duke came from Peter Dunn. They were under him, proved themselves, and then they got to be in their own teams. I think another thing as well in the West I want to see more of is these bigger coaching staffs where you don't just have like one guy or two. Like in this case, this is a great example. You've got some people to specifically be for certain players. So like this guy can help him. He knows this guy. I think that's a great approach too. I think the more support staff you have that work, you can bring some. In the past, people would have said, well, what are they doing? Like, I think if you have tricky players, maybe it's worth it to have like a handler almost, or someone that knows that guy's specific weird quirks or whatever, you know.
I mean, it's a hot take from me, but as a former coach, I firmly believe that teams don't improve collectively. You know, this, oh yeah, let's just like few weeks, we're just going to play more scrims and going to improve. I do not believe they do improve. I think that if you want to make a change as a staff, You need to work individually with the players and assign some key problems that are hindering your team or some solutions to a specific player. Expand the player himself, and then the team will expand, right? So it's a lot of individual tackling of issues and a lot of individual empowering, but the review process of sitting down in front of 5 players that are all trying to temper their ego because they played bad in the scrim, because they didn't sleep enough, they didn't focus, they tried to play that they shouldn't have done and stuff like this, you don't get shit done. The only way you get shit done is sit down with a player, no ego, nobody else in the room, sit down and it's like, how do you play better? Or how do we solve this issue that we always face in the team? And the player's going to tell you, I think my mid laner doesn't play that well. It's like, how can you offset that? Can we make it better? That's how you make a team better. And I feel like the energy approach was so good, because I don't think that Dokla would have gone as far as he did if it wasn't working with Soaz. I don't think that Palafox would have gone so far if he didn't work with Damonte, and Damonte telling him, I was in your shoes. I was in Clutch Gaming and we went to Worlds and I thought I would make it, and then it was way harder. Yes. So be prepared, play more solo queue right now, because you're going to like the fact that you're ready on the patch. All these small things make a world of difference for players, because once you lose as a player, you do not have the time. Players are not being taught to reflect about their performances. They play solo queue and then they're shipped to Berlin or Los Angeles and they play on stage. Having someone that has either the track record or an expertise in doing the introspection about the team problems and the individual problems is how you make a team better. And for this reason, I firmly I am on your side of bring extra coaches to address individual problems. This will do wonders for your team. And I really like the fact that Karmine Corp was like, we're going to take the very guy that can help Bo, because if he flips and he starts playing bad, we don't want to do what Vitality did, which is putting him on a Sejuani duty, because it doesn't work. We're going to try to find the problem and solve it individually with him, which is the right way to do.
Also, by the way, as our last point, because you nailed it with that, and I want to hit on this. Here's another reason why the answer isn't, oh, the ball project didn't work, so have him play the tank. Is that's just a waste of ball. You may as well have someone else. My analogy would be, I'm not a big car guy, but I know a key thing about cars famously is they have different strengths, right? That would be like having a Formula One car, but you just use it to go get your shopping. Like, obviously, the Formula One car needs to be on a big track where it can go like 200 miles an hour or something. If you want to just go around the town, you have a little mini car, don't you? You have like a small car that you can just park and nice parallel park. It would be stupid to use a Formula One car. So my analogy for that one is like, if you're not going to let Bo carry, by the way, just get a different jungler. Like, why stick with him at that point?
Douglas.
Yeah, why stick with him?
They got Douglas. At least Vitality went, they went all in. They were like, okay, we just let Bo go. We don't know what to do with this player. Someone is going to take care of it. And I respect a lot Vitality off season for going sane.
Yeah.
There is nothing insane in the off season. And I mean, I'm on your side, yeah.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.